Hello everyone, and welcome back to the British Accent Podcast. I'm your host, Robert, and I'm really excited for today's episode because we're doing something a little different and a lot more personal. Last time, we talked about job interviews, tips, tricks, and everything in between. But this episode, it's not about the rules, it's about the real stories. Yours. We asked you to share your experiences, the good, the bad, and the awkward, and wow, we received so many interesting messages. So, today we're going to listen, react, and talk honestly about what it means to actually find a job in today's world. It's going to be an open, honest, and deep conversation. So grab a cup of tea, settle in, and let's get started. In our last episode, we explored one of the most important steps in the job-seeking journey, the job interview. We broke it down into several parts, giving our listeners a well-rounded and structured guide on how to face interviews with more confidence and preparation. We started by discussing the preparation before the interview, highlighting how crucial it is to research the company, understand the job description in depth, and review your own CV. We emphasized not just memorizing answers, but being familiar with your achievements, so you can speak naturally and clearly about your skills. Then, we moved to the actual moment of the interview, where we gave practical advice on how to answer questions effectively, especially open-ended questions like, "Tell me about yourself," and "Why should we hire you?" We talked about staying focused, avoiding long-winded answers, and the importance of structure in replies, especially using clear language and examples. In the next part, we explained how your behavior during the interview says just as much as your words. We talked about being punctual, dressing appropriately, staying calm, and treating every person you meet, from the receptionist to the manager, with respect. We also included common mistakes to avoid, like being too casual, criticizing past employers, or talking too much. One key takeaway was to always stay professional, even when the interview seems relaxed. After covering the core interview content, we brought in Sophie to give her thoughts, and she shared some valuable reflections on the emotional side of interviews, how pressure can affect people, and how to stay motivated even after rejection. Finally, we ended the episode with a reflection to the listeners, encouraging them to share their own experiences in the comments or messages. We reminded them that job interviews are not just challenges, but opportunities to grow and present the best version of themselves. So that was a deep dive back into our last episode on job interviews. I hope it was as helpful to you as it was fun for us to record. But today, we're taking it a step further. Over the past week, we received some amazing voice messages and comments from our listeners, sharing their own stories, challenges, and even some questions about job interviews. Honestly, some of them were inspiring, and others were a bit heartbreaking, but they all reflect just how real and relatable this topic is. So, let's get right into it. We're going to listen to the first message we received, and it's one that caught our attention right away.
Hi Robert, thanks a lot for your episode on job interviews. It actually reminded me of something that happened to me not too long ago, and it still feels fresh. So, I was applying for a junior architecture position at a firm I'd admired for years. I was so excited when I got the call for an interview. I spent days preparing, practicing my answers, reviewing my portfolio, even rehearsing in front of a mirror. The interview day came, and it started off okay. The two interviewers were polite, but very serious. They asked technical questions, and I handled them well. But then, one of them suddenly asked me what I thought of one of their recent design projects, which I hadn't seen. I panicked. Instead of admitting that I wasn't familiar with the project, I tried to talk around it. I ended up giving a vague answer that made no sense. They looked confused, and I could tell I'd lost them. It only got worse when they asked me to suggest improvements. I basically froze. When the interview ended, I already knew I wasn't getting the job. But what really got to me was the shame I felt afterward. I kept thinking, why didn't I just say, I haven't seen it, but I'd love to take a look and give you my thoughts? Why did I feel the need to pretend? I guess I was afraid of looking unprepared, but in the end, I probably looked worse by faking it. Anyway, I'm in a better place now. I got a job at another firm a few months later, but that experience taught me a lot. I just wanted to share it because maybe others have done the same thing. We don't always talk about the interviews we mess up.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that story with us. I'm sure a lot of listeners just nodded quietly to themselves while hearing it, remembering a moment when they, too, tried to push through an unexpected question instead of just being honest. First of all, I want to say how brave you were, both in trying to handle the moment as best as you could, and even more so in reflecting on it with such honesty afterward. What happened to you is something many of us go through. We try so hard to be perfect in interviews, to have all the answers, to come across as ultra-prepared, because we care so much. But ironically, that fear of seeming unprepared often leads us to make choices that hurt our credibility more than help it. And yet, what really moved me was what you said toward the end, that this experience taught you something valuable. You didn't let it stop you. You learned, you grew, and now you're in a better place. That is the heart of resilience, not pretending that mistakes didn't happen, but owning them and rising from them. And you're right, we rarely talk about failed interviews. It's like a silent shame a lot of people carry. But sharing this story will help others feel less alone, and maybe even make them feel okay with saying, I don't know, but I'd love to learn. So again, thank you. That message was powerful. So Sophie, you heard that message. I have to say, it really hit home for me. That feeling of being caught off guard in an interview and trying to improvise your way through, it's something I think we've all done at some point, right?
Absolutely. And what stood out to me the most was the internal pressure this person felt, the belief that saying I don't know is the worst thing you can do in an interview. But in reality, honesty can actually build trust. Employers aren't expecting robots. They want real, self-aware humans.
I think many people don't realize that admitting what you don't know, and showing enthusiasm to learn, can be a strength. It shows humility and a growth mindset.
Also, the shame they described. I found that so relatable. That mental loop we go through after interviews, replaying every word. It can be exhausting. But the fact that they later landed a job shows that one bad interview doesn't define you.
That's an important takeaway. A lot of listeners might be sitting on an experience like this and assuming it means they're not good enough. But it's just one moment, and moments don't define careers.
And I loved that they turned it into a lesson. It's not about pretending to be perfect. It's about learning and doing better next time.
So to everyone listening, if you've had an interview go wrong, you're not alone. And like this listener, you can absolutely bounce back stronger. Now, let's hear the totally opposite experiences we have choose from another listener.
Hi Robert and Sophie, I wanted to share my own experience because it's something I'm still struggling with. So, I'm a recent graduate in marketing, and I've been applying for entry-level roles for the past few months. I've had a few interviews, but there's this one that stuck with me, and not in a good way. It was for a digital marketing assistant role at a startup. I was excited but nervous, especially because I knew competition would be tough. During the interview, everything was going smoothly until they asked me about SEO strategies. I had studied it briefly, but I didn't have much hands-on experience. I told them honestly that I didn't have a lot of experience yet, but I was eager to learn. The interviewer smiled and nodded, but I could sense the energy shift. The rest of the interview felt rushed, and I didn't hear back from them after that, not even a rejection email. What's bothering me isn't that I didn't get the job, it's that I feel like honesty cost me the opportunity. I've been wondering if I should have just exaggerated a bit or given a more confident answer. Did I blow my shot by being honest? Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Thanks so much for your message, and for your honesty. I really appreciate you sharing your story. What you're describing is actually something many people struggle with, especially early in their careers. You're absolutely not alone. First of all, I want to say, you did the right thing by being honest. It might not have landed you that specific job, but what you showed was integrity, and that matters a lot more in the long run than one interview. Companies worth working for value people who are upfront and willing to learn. Now, it's true that confidence plays a role in interviews, but confidence doesn't have to mean pretending you know everything. It can simply mean saying something like, "I've only just begun working with SEO, but I've been actively learning, and I'm confident I can pick it up quickly." That way, you're honest, but also showing eagerness and growth mindset, and that's powerful. Also, try not to take that silence personally. Startups especially can be chaotic behind the scenes. Not hearing back may not even reflect anything about your performance. You did your best, you stayed true to yourself, and you're still learning. That's all anyone can ask. Keep going, the right opportunity will come, and it will be one that values exactly the kind of honesty and effort you showed.
That was a really touching message, Robert. And your reply reminded me of just how much pressure people feel to perform in interviews, sometimes more than they feel the pressure to be real.
And I think the moment you feel like you have to act instead of share, that's when the stress really builds. What stood out to me most in that message was how deeply the experience stayed with them, not because they didn't get the job, but because of the shame they felt for pretending.
Yes, and I think it's important we talk about that shame too. It's so normal to feel like we need to impress. But ironically, the moments we try to impress by stretching the truth are the ones that haunt us most, more than simply admitting we didn't know something.
And I think interviews, the good ones, anyway, can spot that kind of bluffing. But they also spot honesty. A simple "I'm not familiar with that project, but I'd love to explore it and give feedback" shows interest, humility, and initiative. That goes a long way.
And it's a sign of emotional intelligence too. So often, we prepare for interviews thinking it's all about technical skills, when really, they're looking at the whole person.
And let's be honest, many of us have had an interview moment like that one. We just rarely talk about it.
That's why I loved that message so much, it broke the silence. And hopefully, it reminds others that messing up in interviews doesn't make you a failure. It just makes you human.
Couldn't have said it better. And now, let's move on to the next message from one of our listeners.
Hi Robert and Sophie, thanks so much for your podcast. It's honestly been a comfort during one of the most stressful periods of my life. A year ago, I decided to move to another country in hopes of finding a better job and a fresh start. I'm originally from India, and I moved to Germany with a degree in mechanical engineering and a dream. But the reality hit hard. I thought my qualifications would speak for themselves, but I quickly found out that employers were hesitant, mostly because of the language barrier and the fact that I didn't have experience in Germany. I sent out over 60 applications in the first 2 months. I got maybe 4 interviews. And even those felt discouraging. I often didn't understand parts of the questions, and I struggled to express myself confidently in German. One time, during a group interview, I completely misunderstood the task we were given. While everyone was brainstorming design improvements, I was writing a cost report. I was so embarrassed when I realized. No one laughed or anything, but I could feel I wasn't seen as on the same level. What's worse is the loneliness that came with it. No one really talks about how isolating it is to job hunt in a country where you don't know anyone, and everything, from writing a CV to just understanding job titles, feels unfamiliar. Eventually, I started taking language classes seriously, asked for help from locals, and found a mentor through a migrant support network. And after almost 9 months, I finally got a job. It's not in my exact field yet, but it's a foot in the door, and I'm learning every day. I guess I just wanted to say, to anyone out there looking for jobs in a new country, it's really hard. But it's possible, and you are not alone. Thanks for letting me share.
Thanks so much for sharing that incredibly honest and powerful message. First of all, congratulations on getting that job. Even if it's not exactly in your field yet, the fact that you pushed through so much uncertainty, rejection, and cultural shock to reach this point is a huge achievement. I want to say this clearly, you should be proud of yourself. What you've described is something many people don't fully understand, the emotional toll of job hunting abroad. It's not just about qualifications, it's about navigating a completely different system, adapting your expectations, and constantly translating your worth into another language, often literally. And I really appreciate how you touched on the isolation of that experience. Because yes, job hunting is hard. But job hunting in a country where you don't have support, don't speak the language fluently, and feel like every mistake proves their doubts about you. That's another level. The story about the group interview, that hit home. It's so easy to misinterpret a task when you're dealing with language stress or cultural differences. And yet, you didn't give up. You learned. You connected with people. You found a mentor. That's what resilience looks like. I hope your message reaches other listeners going through something similar. It's not weakness to struggle. It's strength to keep going. And if anyone listening is in the same situation, I want to say, look for networks, even small ones. Talk to people. Ask for help. Your effort doesn't go unnoticed, even if it feels like it does sometimes. Thank you again for opening up. That message really hit me, Sophie. I think a lot of people underestimate how emotionally draining job hunting in another country can be. It's not just about the resume, it's about identity, confidence, and the pressure to prove yourself all over again.
And what stood out to me most was that feeling of isolation. It's something we don't talk about enough. You're in a new place, trying to figure out how things work, and on top of that, you're dealing with rejection, sometimes for reasons that have nothing to do with your abilities.
Right. Like when the listener misunderstood the group interview task, that's such a human moment. And yet, in the high-pressure setting of a job interview, one misstep can feel like the end of the world.
And it's interesting how they mentioned eventually finding help through a migrant support group. That's so important. No matter how independent or qualified you are, it's okay and actually smart to lean on community.
I agree. And it also reminds me of something broader, how many talented people are overlooked just because they don't fit the locals' mold. It's a loss, not just for the individual, but for companies and teams that miss out on unique perspectives and skills.
That's a good point. And for anyone listening who might be an employer or recruiter, it's worth reflecting on how we assess candidates. Are we really giving people the space to show what they're capable of? Or are we letting accents and unfamiliar formats cloud our judgment?
I couldn't have said it better. And to the listener, your story was a reminder of how much courage it takes to start over. I hope others hear it and feel a little less alone.
And maybe a bit more hopeful too. Even when the journey is long and messy, it can lead to something meaningful.
Alright, now let's take a moment to turn to your comments, the part of the show where we hear from you, our listeners. You've been sharing some really thoughtful messages, and as always, they spark deeper conversations. Here's one of the comments we got this week. Hey Robert, thanks for the last episode. As a designer, I'm starting to see people using AI instead of hiring for small projects, logos, quick edits, even full branding. It's making me question how stable creative jobs are going to be. Do you think we'll still need human interviews when AI is doing so much of the work? That's a big question, and it's one that many of us are starting to ask. Okay. Thanks for that message. It really hits on something many people are worried about right now. Is AI taking over jobs? Honestly, yes and no. In some industries, especially creative ones like design or writing, AI is definitely becoming a powerful tool. It can generate ideas, speed up workflows, even create entire concepts in minutes. And that can feel threatening. But here's the thing, AI still lacks the human touch. It doesn't understand taste, culture, context, or emotion the way we do. It can assist, but it doesn't replace. What's really changing is the skill set we need. Instead of just creating, designers now also need to know how to collaborate with AI. It's becoming part of the toolbox. And those who adapt, who learn how to guide AI instead of fear it, will be the ones shaping the future, not watching it pass by. So yes, it's a shift. But it's not the end. If anything, it's a call to grow, to learn, and to evolve. You're not being replaced. You're being challenged, and you've got this. Okay, let's move on to the next comment. How to deal with rejections. I've been to several interviews recently and didn't land any of them. It's starting to affect my confidence. I keep thinking maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe I'll never find the right fit. Any advice on how to stay positive when it feels like the doors just keep closing? Sophie?
Thanks, Robert. And to our listener, I really appreciate your honesty. What you shared hits home for so many people, especially those trying to find work in a new country. It's not just about finding a job. It's about adjusting to a new culture, language, and way of doing things, all while dealing with pressure and uncertainty. I know it's incredibly tough to face rejection again and again. It can make you question your skills, your worth, even your decisions. But here's the thing, rejection doesn't mean you're not good enough. It just means the opportunity wasn't the right fit, or the timing wasn't right. And that's something outside of your control. If I may suggest, take every interview, every application, as a learning experience. Keep refining your approach, and don't be afraid to ask for feedback when you can. Also, connect with others in similar situations. There's a huge community of people out there navigating the same journey, and you can support each other. Most importantly, be kind to yourself. You're doing something incredibly brave, starting over in a new country. That takes strength. And remember, the right opportunity often comes when you least expect it. Keep going. You're not alone.
Okay, after hearing the stories from our listeners today, especially the one about trying to find work abroad and facing rejection after rejection, I was reminded of something I read recently that really struck a chord. It's from an article by a young woman named Zainab, who shared her personal experience with job hunting and the emotional toll that rejection can take. I'd love to read a bit of it here because I think it might resonate with many of you listening. She writes, "Job rejection is one of life's toughest challenges. Whether it's the dreaded "we regret to inform you" email after an interview or the deafening silence that follows an application submission, each rejection can feel like a personal failure. You start to question your worth, your abilities, and even your future. The uncertainty becomes exhausting. And honestly, how many of us have felt exactly that? Zainab goes on to say that she struggled with intense self-doubt. She found herself comparing her journey to others, wondering why her friends were landing jobs while she was getting doors closed. That spiral of comparison is something so many job seekers go through. But she also talked about the turning point, and this is what really moved me. She writes, "One day, I realized I had never actually allowed myself to feel the rejection. I was brushing it off, pretending it didn't affect me. But the truth is, I was hurt. And I needed to acknowledge that before I could move forward." That kind of honesty is powerful. Sometimes we treat job hunting like a numbers game, send enough CVs, someone will say yes. But behind each application is hope, and when that hope is crushed, it leaves a scar if we don't talk about it. She then gives some solid advice, which I think is worth sharing here. Give yourself permission to grieve. Rejection isn't trivial. It stings. You're allowed to feel disappointed. Talk to someone. Share how you're feeling with a friend, a family member, even a therapist. Don't bottle it up. Reframe your mindset. Instead of seeing rejection as a sign you're not good enough, see it as redirection, not rejection. Celebrate the small wins. Even just getting called for an interview is a sign that something in your application stood out. Zainab ends the article by saying, "We often hear stories of success, of people who got the job, who got the call, who made it. But we don't hear enough about the ones who didn't. Those stories matter too, because they remind us that we're not alone. Rejection is part of the journey, not the end of it." That last line stuck with me. So, to anyone out there still waiting, still trying, still hearing no, please remember, this doesn't define your worth or your potential. Every step you take, even the painful ones, are part of a bigger story that's still being written. And if you'd like to read the full article, we'll leave the link in the episode description. It's called Coping with Job Rejection, Finding Strength and Moving Forward, and it's published on youngminds.org.uk. You're not alone.
Thanks, Robert. That was powerful. And I think it's a good moment to bring in something that's been weighing on a lot of people's minds lately, something many of our listeners have mentioned in their messages: artificial intelligence and how it's changing the job landscape. I found a thoughtful article the other day, published on Harvard Business Review, titled, "Will AI Take My Job? What to Know About the Future of Work?" by Thomas Chamorro Premusic. It offers a grounded, realistic look at what's happening without the panic and without the hype. Let me read a bit from it, because I think it says what many of us are thinking. AI is not going to take your job. But someone who knows how to use AI probably will. Right? That sentence hit me. It's not about fearing the technology itself, it's about understanding how to adapt to it. The article continues. The rise of AI doesn't mean human jobs will disappear overnight. But it does mean that many roles will evolve. Repetitive, data-heavy tasks may become automated. But the demand for creativity, emotional intelligence, and ethical decision-making will actually increase. And that's key. AI is fast, efficient, and sometimes scarily accurate. But it lacks empathy, judgment, and human connection, things that are crucial in education, healthcare, management, and even engineering and design. The article points out that the real winners of this AI shift will be people who embrace a mindset of lifelong learning. Not necessarily tech experts, but individuals who are curious, adaptable, and open to learning how these tools work. Here's another passage I really liked. The best way to future-proof your career isn't to become a coder. It's to become a better human, better at collaboration, problem-solving, and communicating in complex, emotional environments. That's such a refreshing take. We tend to think that surviving the AI revolution means becoming some kind of digital wizard, but in reality, soft skills are becoming more valuable than ever. Finally, the article closes with this. AI may change the job market, but it also opens the door to new kinds of work, jobs that haven't even been invented yet. Our task is to stay curious, keep learning, and not be afraid to evolve. The future will reward those who adapt, not those who resist. I think that's a hopeful message. AI doesn't have to be the enemy. It can be a powerful tool, but only if we know how to work with it, not against it. And for anyone listening who's feeling anxious about all this, remember, you're not falling behind. We're all figuring this out together. We'll leave the link to the full article in the description if you want to dive deeper. Again, it's called Will AI Take My Job? And it's definitely worth a read.
Thanks for reading that, Sophie. It's interesting, when we first talked about doing this episode, I thought the focus would stay on interviews, nerves, CVS, but so many people mentioned AI in their comments. It's clearly something everyone's thinking about.
And I think it's not just about AI replacing jobs. It's the uncertainty that comes with it. People are wondering, will my skills still matter? Should I change careers? What if I can't keep up?
Exactly. And like the article said, it's not about turning everyone into software engineers. It's more about mindset. I love that quote, "The best way to future-proof your career is to become a better human." That's powerful.
It really is. And you know, the more I think about it, the more I realize that many of the skills people already use in job interviews, things like self-awareness, communication, empathy, those are the same skills that'll stay valuable, even in an AI-heavy world.
That's a great point. When someone sits in an interview and tells a story about a difficult project they led, or how they solved a conflict with a teammate, those are things no algorithm can replicate.
And for job seekers who feel overwhelmed, I think it's helpful to shift the mindset from "AI will replace me" to "How can I use AI to support my work?"
Right. I mean, I've seen people use tools like ChatGPT to help brainstorm ideas for presentations, prepare for interviews, even practice answers out loud. It's like having a study buddy, but it doesn't replace the actual thinking or the human presence.
And that human presence, your tone, your energy, your body language, your ability to connect, that's still what makes or breaks a job interview.
Definitely. So maybe the big takeaway from this part of the episode is, don't panic. Keep learning, stay open to tools, but don't forget the strengths you already bring, especially the human ones.
And if you're listening and you've had an experience, maybe a great interview where you used AI to help prepare, or maybe a rough one where tech didn't help at all, send it in. We'd love to hear more real stories.
Well, that brings us to the end of this very special episode. We've heard some real stories today, stories of courage, fear, mistakes, and growth. And I have to say, it's reminded me how human the job search really is.
Whether you're facing rejection, fumbling through an interview, or feeling overwhelmed by how fast technology is changing the job market, you're not alone. Every step you take teaches you something, even if it doesn't feel like it right away.
I want to thank everyone who sent us a message. You trusted us with your stories, and that means a lot. And to everyone listening, if you've ever left an interview thinking "I blew it," just remember, that doesn't define your future.
And it's okay to say "I don't know" or "I'm not sure" in an interview. Honesty and authenticity are powerful. No one has all the answers, not even robots.
So true. And speaking of robots, AI and automation are just one part of a big picture. You still have your ideas, your experiences, your creativity, and that's something no algorithm can replicate.
Before we go, here's a little challenge for you. Think back to your last job interview. What did you learn about yourself? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Send us a voice message, an email, or comment on our page.
Okay then, keep learning, keep growing, and don't forget, it's okay to mess up. That's how we learn.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.